I'm George Galloway.
I'm Steve Topple.
Together we are Topple Galloway. Steve, have you just been released from the jungle?
No, I haven't. This is the finest Adidas eBay on the cheap can buy, actually.
No, I mention it because Harry Redknapp won. Harry,
oh yes,
Harry, as they call him down in the south, was a triumph. And the reason he was a triumph is because he was genuine and authentic and unspun. He's the Jeremy Corbyn of I'm a celebrity, get me out of here.
That's really quite a remarkable statement.
I'm the only man, perhaps, certainly the first, to make it. But Harry Redknapp won that contest by public vote because he's everything that Corbyn is. He's got no side. What you see is what you get. Certain political, incorrectnesses. I mean, he said of one of the female members of the camp, she'd be useful if she was scrubbed up. So that falls down on 2 counts. Now, Jeremy would never say anything like that, but you get my point that this is a working class hero. Harry Redknapp is a working class hero. Jeremy Corbyn is a working class hero. I think it's very portentous. You may not agree.
Now, obviously, I've been watching I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here religiously.
You and me both.
However, I've read some headlines, and there was talk he was going to leave at one point, and then
he lost a lot of weight. Actually, it's a good way to lose a few pounds. He lost nearly a stone, and I think he looks better for it.
The Galloway diet plan: bugs and kangaroo anus. There we go. I've read a few headlines, but I think you're onto something actually, because it's very interesting that because this got ITV the highest rating of the year. I think
it's a big event.
A big celebrity brain bleach event, which can stupefy the masses into ignoring everything else that's going on. However, I think you might be on something with the fact that he won in the relation to Corbyn, because it obviously shows that in the public psyche, the millions of people who watch this, but who interestingly may not be interested in politics, are obviously hunkering after as sort of something to look up to and to idolise at the minute.
Your uncle,
working class.
You're looking for your uncle. Your kindly, wise, steady uncle. And Corbyn is that in the political field, certainly by comparison with the others.
We'll get on to that later.
And Harry was that in the jungle. The other airbrushed celebrities, coiffed and so on, have all fallen by the wayside, and Harry won. I bumped into in a cafe, I'm glad to say a cafe, because he was once upon a time never out of the pub. Anthony from X Factor, the Liverpool guy. Now, Anthony got to the final, yet if you saw and heard him, you wouldn't have been surprised if he was in handcuffs on his way to the Nick in the streets of Liverpool. A rough diamond, but a diamond nonetheless. As working class as it's possible to be, he got all the way to the final in the X Factor, whilst loads of airbrushed trolley dollies, and the women were worse, fell by the wayside. So I think it's the age of the Anthonys, the Harrys, and the Jeremys. I may be making too much of this, but I think the fact that Harry looked right from the start as the guy that could go all the way. He's the best England manager that England never had. Mind you, they're doing all right with another quite plain guy who wears a waistcoat, just like me.
And that whole debate went over my head. I'll forgive you, dear viewers, if your heads have temporarily exploded and you're unable to watch Topple Galloway this week, because if you have been trying to keep up with the ongoing Brexit shambles, as it's being called, then you probably haven't been able to, because me, as a journalist who gets paid to do this stuff, is struggling to keep up as well. We've lurched from the vote on Brexit, haven't we? The vote going ahead, then suddenly it wasn't going ahead, then the European Court of Justice saying that we can cancel the whole damn thing anyway, then Theresa May flying off to The Hague when we were all hoping it was over Yemen and the UN report from Philip Alston, but she was actually off to have breakfast with the Dutch Prime Minister. And as it stands at time of recording this, George,
that's a key caveat, because actually by the end of this day, the vote that was cancelled may be back on again, because Parliament is going to vote today on whether to vote tonight on the Brexit deal.
Yes.
This is a deal that Theresa May said was the deal, the best deal, the only deal, the unimprovable deal. But she's now, as you say, in The Hague trying to improve it. Having told us, and the EU having told us, that it was not renegotiable.
Yes.
No, it isn't renegotiable. What Juncker said today is that it's not up for renegotiation. More clarification is possible.
That was always a clarification and legal, something legal clarification as well, I think.
Well, the idea that the mass revolt in the House of Commons that made her pull the vote in the first place is going to be assuaged by, mere warm words, if Juncker is capable of warm words. I mean, one of the things that stands out for me in this whole period is just how ugly and how cold, impersonal, brutish the leaders of the EU are. I mean, to paraphrase Groucho Marx, anybody that would have them in their club, I wouldn't want to join. They're not just in the club, they're running the club. But Juncker's warm words won't butter any parsnips on the benches of the DUP or the benches of the Tory Brexiteers. So I'm not sure what this postponement was all about, unless there's something we don't yet know. Because, I mean, she's only bought herself time, but how much time? A day? 3 days? Is it that good being Prime Minister that you are actually going to be on a 0 hours contract and not know if you've got any more work tomorrow or the rest of this week? It's quite unprecedented. As you know, been in politics a long time. Don't tell the wife she thinks I'm 45, but I've been in politics for 50 years. And I was in Parliament for almost 30 years. I lived through Black Wednesday. I lived through Mrs. Thatcher being overthrown in Parliament. And I have never seen chaos like this. And I always know where things are headed, or think I do. Sometimes I'm right. I was wrong in, I think, 1977, 78, something like that. But I always think I know where things are headed. But I have no idea where this is headed.
No.
Are we Brexiting? Are we not? Is there a general election? Is there not? Does Theresa May get overthrown? Does she stagger on? Does the Tory party split? Does the Labour Party split? All of these and many more are options in this utterly tumultuous, unpredictable time.
It's absolutely staggering. I mean, as you say, I have no idea either, and I never expected I would, to be honest. I couldn't predict what's going to happen here. I mean, as things stand, as we're recording on Tuesday, we haven't had Corbyn's emergency debate yet. What is most interesting, though, for me in all of this is what's going on in Labour, because currently you have around 50 MPs, led by the obnoxious Ian Murray, supported by Chuka Umunna, signing a letter trying to force Corbyn into a no confidence vote. And you have the SNP, Green, Plaid, and Liberal Democrats trying to force Corbyn's hand on this as well. Now, not much has been made of this, but for me, this is another kind of backhanded, backstabbing attempt by these bitter right.
You just got to look at the Labour names.
To try and completely undermine Corbyn, and it's a very sneaky thing they're doing, because if he makes one false-footed move with this no confidence vote, then it could potentially finish him, because he has to pick his timing with this.
Of course, you only get one chance.
You do.
You only get one chance at a no confidence vote. If you put a no confidence vote and it succeeds in rallying the Tories around Theresa May, then it's not just failed; it's backfired. It actually alters the course of events in the wrong way. So the Labour whips, the chief whip is a friend of mine, Nick Brown. He's a very savvy guy. He's been in one whip's office or another for decades. He knows Parliament inside out. I'm quite content to leave it to him to advise on when the time to strike with a no confidence vote is. But you can imagine if you held a no confidence vote this evening, all the Tories would back Theresa May. The DUP would back Theresa May. Therefore, it would fall. Therefore, what's the point of it? And as you say, correctly identify, the point of it is to undermine Corbyn. That's why Chuka Umunna and all the Blairite rump are backing it. And Caroline Lucas. I know you're a green kind of guy. I think Caroline Lucas' performance is utterly deplorable. She's the mouthpiece for the big banks, big austerity EU, and she's doing her best to weaken, injure, undermine Jeremy Corbyn, who, whatever else you think of him, is the only alternative Prime Minister that the left has.
You took the words a bit out of my mouth, to be honest, because my liking of the Greens is slightly tarnished at the minute with the whole Brexit situation. I find especially her narrative, and I've interviewed her several times, and having interviewed her, she's the least authentic Green politician I've met, I have to say, and my liking of her is kind of quite diminished. I think she's not doing the Green Party or herself any favours.
I don't think so. Certainly
but she's not doing anyone any favours, really, because out of all the various avenues this situation could go down, this damned people's vote is not the correct one still, whatever you think.
Well, look, what would that solve, Steve? Either Remain would win narrowly, in which case tens, maybe even more, millions of people in this country would feel cheated and robbed. Some millions would feel embittered and angry. And who could be the beneficiary of that anger? It can only be the right, and even the far right. Or Leave would win again, narrowly, in which case they'd blame Russia. They'd say it was Putin, and the demand would be on for yet another one. And another way of derailing the whole Brexit process. So this people's vote, which is such an insulting term because it implies the last referendum was not a people's vote. What was that? Artificial intelligence? So that's the worst avenue to go down, but it's the avenue that Lucas and Umunna and Blair and Clegg and all the usual suspects are trying to take us down. The more I look at it, and I don't see how the logic of this can be resisted forever, the only way to solve this logjam is a general election to change the parliamentary arithmetic, to allow the people to say who they want. It's not a question necessarily of what they want, because you can't in a general election claim that every line in your manifesto has been specifically endorsed by the electorate. It's who they want to take the country into this next period.
And this is the narrative that has been, this is the problem Labour's had, and Labour supporters have had, is they haven't hammered this narrative home quite correctly. Because I agree with you, I think the general election is the best option, because it's the whole problem throughout this Brexit process has been that it's been the Tories bloody doing it. That's been the issue, because we voted as a country to leave. Therefore, the issue is not and never has been whether we should be leaving or not. That was decided, and for everyone who keeps saying you can change your mind, as you rightly said on the show many moons ago, so we keep having a general election every 5 minutes because people change their mind about they voted for the Tories or Labour. It's nonsense. The issue has always been who is negotiating this Brexit, and I think the fact that when we're now at a stage, and we have been at a stage for ages, where it's blatantly obvious that Theresa May and the Conservative Party are incapable of delivering any kind of Brexit which is in the best interest of the people in this country, then the question, as you say, is, okay, so do we the public want someone else to deal with this almighty mess and clear it up? Not do we want to stop this mess altogether, because this mess is happening regardless. And I think as well, whatever your views on leave or remain, we had a referendum and it was done. And I think history will be viewing us far better in this period if we stuck with that, whether that be because in 20 years' time, a great swathe of the public will realise what a con the EU referendum actually was.
And what a con the EU is.
And what a con the EU is.
I mean, as we speak, France is burning. It's spread to Brussels. It's spread to the Netherlands. Macron is in a state of collapse.
Yeah.
The man that Omona posed as the great...
You could almost see his hand on his backside.
Well, I never got that close to either of them. But the reality is that they told us if only Labour were led by someone like Macron, man or woman like Macron, they'd be doing so much better. Yeah. When in fact Macron is incapable of going out onto the streets of his own country. Yeah. His country is in flames. He's capitulating, cancelling, giving. He's just given €100 to everybody in France. He's declared a state of social and economic emergency. And the incoherent anger of the people on the streets of France, not just Paris, but all cities and even in the countryside, is not left or right.
No.
It's not aligned to any party. It's anger at the elite, at the establishment. Well, that's just like what Brexit was. Yeah. It's the same forces that are engaged now. And this Gilets Jaunes, you're kind of wearing a Gilet jaune at the moment in solidarity. I wore one.
I saw
on Saturday night.
Nicola nearly jumped with delight when she saw that. She was absolutely
Ken was a bit cagey about putting one on. He's not really a high-vis jacket kind of guy, but he did sportingly put it on because we wanted to show solidarity. Not that these people are supporters of ours necessarily, or they've ever heard of us. Of course, they probably haven't. Not because we would necessarily support all of their politics, but to argue that these people are, somehow right-wing is an absurdity. Yeah. And we got the stage where the liberal establishment in Britain was at best ignoring what was going on in France. I never saw much of it on British television, but I saw a lot of it on foreign television. Or they were actually wishing Macron to defeat these people. Well, he didn't defeat them. Yeah. They've defeated him. Yeah. It's a new French revolution of sorts, and the French know how to do revolution.
They do indeed, yeah. And no, I think you're right. And as I say, I've been convinced throughout the whole process that in 20 years' time, we will look back and breathe a sigh of relief that we got out of the EU project while we can, because it is, France kind of sums it up nicely. It's literally collapsing around in a heap of its own shit, essentially, isn't it? It's falling apart. And I agree with you, the protests in France, if we segue onto this, the protests in France are a sort of elite backlash, if you like. But what's also interesting for me about these, and I discussed this the other day on our podcast, is that they also present a great challenge for Western governments, because I don't believe a word that comes out of Macron's mouth, don't get me wrong, but essentially the spark that ignited this was the diesel tax increase. Now, it presents a challenge for Western governments because ultimately, whether you believed he was doing it for those reasons or not, on the face of it, he was doing it for Paris climate change, green reasons, and the people weren't having any of it. And this is the whole problem that I think many Western governments and governments worldwide are going to face. That in their attempts to put the blame and the responsibility for the climate catastrophe, which has sent 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions in the past 30 years down to 100 corporations, not the people, in trying to shove this onto the people, I think people are wising up, and there's going to be a massive backlash against the fact that we've got to shoulder the responsibility for...
Just like the financial collapse.
Just like the financial, and this is the point, because they keep trying to do this to us, and I now think in the age, I don't think they've kept up with... Firstly, I don't think they've kept up with social media, because what was fascinating about the French protests as well is that they were fueled by Facebook, if you like. absolutely brilliant because, of course, you know as well as I do, Facebook changed its algorithms last year to take news off people's timelines and replace it with what all their friends were saying. But consequently, what Facebook done was enabled the Yellow Jackets protest in France to just explode because it was people themselves posting about it, not news corporations. So it was all over everyone's timeline.
What a good point.
And it worked against, it didn't work in the way it's supposed to. And so I think that, as you say, because we were blamed, well, we had to shoulder responsibility for the financial crisis, and now we're having to shoulder responsibility for the climate crisis. I think that the powers that be still haven't caught up with the fact of, firstly, social media and the way it works and the way people have access to information now, nor the anger that exists, consciously or not, because I think a lot of anger is subconscious within people. They're very angry and they don't understand why.
Rage, enragé, as the French Revolution used to describe it, the angry ones. And the anger, if you boiled it down, is to this. We didn't cause this crisis, but you're making us pay for it.
Yeah.
The people who did cause the crisis are the last to pay for it.
Yeah.
They're getting richer, we're getting poorer, yet you are piling straws on our back, and the camel's back can only take so much straw.
Yeah.
And the French are not a people who take things lying down, and they were up on their feet in everywhere from Marseille to Toulouse to Nantes to Lille, Paris, and this despite the best part of 100,000 armed security personnel, including tanks. Tanks, by the way, which had no French flag on them, but only the European Union flag. Tanks on the streets. Yeah, that's a European army. All right.
Oh no, that's a conspiracy theory.
The whole country rose up, and the elite are scrambling to get back on their feet. They don't quite know how to handle it. Now, whether Act 5 will be cancelled this weekend, I don't know, but I very much doubt it, because when you've got your enemy on the run, it's probably best not to stop when he's throwing €100 notes at you, because there's a lot more in his pocket that he hasn't yet thrown. I think the lack of a program, the lack of an alternative leader, as happened in the Arab Spring, for example, is a weakness. It's a strength at the moment for the Yellow Jackets, because everyone can join in. You don't have to support Mr. A or Mrs. B or this or that ism. But if you don't have your own program, ultimately you end up being part of someone else's.
Yeah, and then that is, as you say, I think that is the challenge. What's also, two more points, what's interesting about it is it's kind of spread to Holland and Belgium, hasn't it? It's gone, and Theresa May's interestingly sort of jettisoned off to those countries. I'm sure that the Yellow Jackets will come up in conversation, because I'm sure she's probably fearful of the same thing happening over here. I mean, there's
a big run on the sale of Yellow Jackets.
Yes.
Get yours quick.
Yes, check out my timeline on Twitter. There's a link to a special offer on one. There really is. But I think she's probably slightly fearful of the same thing over here.
I'm looking for a designer Yellow Jacket, a kind of classier one. Because they're not very flattering.
They're not. I'm interviewing Vivienne Westwood's son tomorrow, actually.
They're exactly the right family.
I'll have a word.
Yeah, they're the right family to come up with a cool Gilets Jaunes.
They are, and we may need them, and because I'm sure it's crossed Theresa May's mind. Could that happen over here? Because we have Extinction Rebellion currently sort of making ground, if you like. We have even the sort of the flaccid People's Assembly are having a demonstration outside Parliament on Tuesday evening. So there's probably concern to her. My concern is I'm not sure this country has the capabilities to have a movement like that, purely because, and I've used this phrase a lot, is I coined it years ago, Max Kaiser actually, and this country has a feudal hangover, in so much that as a populace, I think it's almost in our DNA that we're quite subservient and quite, oh no, okay, all right, then we'll shut up and take our lot in life. We haven't got, the French have a proud history of this, and while we saw the Iraq War march, obviously, where millions of people came out and a Labour government essentially ignored them, I'm not convinced we could see...
Not a paper cup was dropped in the street.
No, I mean, the only sort of comparable for me over the past few decades would be sort of the poll tax movement, really. Yeah. But otherwise, we're not very good at this kind of thing.
The poll tax movement was more proletarian in character, more working class. Well, look, I know that that's a widely held view, and it may be right, but I know it's ancient history, but might I remind you that the people of this country, England, rose up and executed their king 150 years before the French did. The English had a revolution. Not far from here, the levellers took the land in common. Cromwell was a revolutionary leader. The monarchy was destroyed. Only briefly, and they actually dug Cromwell up from the grave and cut his head off. And the monarchy was restored in a more weak fashion. But I'm not so sure that the people of England have spoken yet, but they might.
They might. If you switch off I'm a Celebrity, you might, yes.
This week, the spies came in from the cold. They had been in the cold of a derelict mill in Achtermuchty at your expense. Now, Achtermuchty is a place that not many people have visited. It's, if known for anything, as part of a Scottish tongue-twisting limerick involving Achtermuchty, Echelfechen and Milne Guy. The Celtic Supporters Club bus used to stop there for fish and chips on Saturday night, so I happen to know Achtermuchty quite well, but you've probably never been there. And you certainly won't have been to the derelict mill that is the recipient of £2 million of public money from the Foreign Office to a charity, Steve, there, called the Institute for Statecraft, which has a illegitimate child called the Integrity Initiative. Now, a charity is not allowed to be political. So first of all, it's in total breach of charity law and ought to be forced to give back all the tax deductions it got from being a charity, as well as an inquiry into why it was given charitable status in the first place, because its objects are to counter what it calls disinformation, misinformation from Russia. So whatever your view on that, it's a highly political purpose. And you're not allowed to have a political purpose and be a charity in Britain. If you don't believe me, I'll show you my scars. So the Charity Commission is completely remiss for allowing this outfit. But who are they? They are not one, but two. If you've read John le Carré, you know that George Smiley was never ex-firm, because you don't retire from the intelligence services, you merely go on gardening leave. But these are two ex-military intelligence army officers who are in this derelict mill in Achtermuchty, getting £2 million per year, with a total budget, by the way, of 100 million for them and other outfits like them, to counter Russia. So far, so controversial. But the Scottish Daily Record, for which I used to write a column, and its Sunday edition, the Sunday Mail, suddenly broke the cover-up of all this by running a front-page splash. Why? Because not only has this outfit been attacking Russia, it's been attacking Jeremy Corbyn, Labour, and the official opposition. Her Majesty's opposition. Her Majesty's loyal opposition. The Right Honourable Privy Councillor Jeremy Corbyn has been being attacked on Twitter and in the media as part of a dirty tricks, psyops, run by this initiative in a mill in Achtermuchty. So think about that. The British government is paying people to attack the British opposition. Now, this has never happened before in Britain, at least not openly. There would have been a cutout. The state would have given someone like you or me the money and said, why don't you go away and do that? But this is in the books. It's actually a money trail from the Foreign Office to them, right to their Twitter account, to their attacks on Jeremy Corbyn. So the Foreign Office is in big trouble. The Charity Commission's in big trouble. The government, if we ever get out from under the upper-tree of Brexit, is going to be in trouble. If Corbyn comes to power, they're all in trouble, which is why they're getting desperate. You know, I'm making this Killing Kelly film. It's almost... It's getting on now for fully funded. So looks like, touch wood, that we will be making it.
Good.
One of its demands is that Corbyn should reopen the David Kelly inquiry. And I'm pretty sure he'll agree to that demand. So they're all panicking. So they're losing their customary smoothness, suaveness, and making mistakes. And this is a very big mistake. So the Foreign Office has now announced an inquiry into itself. How did we end up giving money to two spies in Achtermuchty to attack the leader of Her Majesty's opposition? Like they didn't already know that. I've got two additional points to make on it. One is, I would have thought these people had evolved beyond flat-footed, army-booted British Army intelligence. Anybody I've ever known in the Army thinks that Army intelligence is an oxymoron. You'd have thought that their spies would have been of a different class rather than these flat-footed soldiers. But no, it appears. Almost everyone involved in the Integrity Initiative is either a serving TA officer or a former British Army intelligence officer. So that's my first point. And my second point is, why did C, the commander of MI6, agree to millions of pounds of spook money going to a couple of guys in Achtermuchty in a derelict mill, and now bringing the trade into disrepute? There's only one answer to that. There must be so much money washing around in the spook pool that 2 million quid is neither here nor there.
And this, for me, is the broader point, because as I always view these things, it's a case for me of not what they're telling us, what they're not telling us. And for me, this is kind of now, we're getting to the icing on the cake, if you like. The fact, firstly, that, because this story is part of a wider story for me, and I wrote about this in 2016, that the Foreign Office quietly released this large strategy paper on how to counter Russian propaganda. This huge document. No one else really reported on it, but I sort of went through it all. And it was all about how to get sort of Western propaganda out there and how to counter it. So, and it's kind of, it's been building this story from that point, if you like. But I'm more concerned with exactly who else is involved in this. Because you and I have off camera spoken about certain concerns we have. I don't think it's appropriate to say them on camera necessarily, but of certain journalists who we do wonder about. And I'm just wondering how far this net goes and how far outside of Corbyn does this really go? Because I mean, it's a natural conclusion to assume, in my opinion, especially with certain people at the Canary, that there are files on us somewhere. I mean, the file on you must be absolutely ridiculously huge. And I would imagine there's notes on me, probably notes on my boss, Kerry-Ann Mendoza. And I don't think we've seen the last of this yet. And again, with all things, I don't think we'll ever get to the actual truth of exactly what has been going on here. Because... And I always think this, and I might be wrong, maybe I'm too sceptical, but I always think, well, if they're allowing us to know this, what are they not telling us? Because if they didn't want this in the public domain, it wouldn't be in the public domain. Sure.
Up to a point, it was interesting that it was a Scottish paper that broke the embargo on all this. But think about it. The entire media ignored the events in Paris. For 4 weeks, Paris was on fire, ignored. The entire media ignored it, and then attacked the Russians for filming events in a Western capital that they were deliberately not filming in the hope that it would go away. Yet so much did it not go away that the President of France himself has declared a social and economic emergency in the country and started throwing euros at the crowd. So that means the entire British media was in complete dereliction of its professional duty to report what was going on, and was attacking other journalists at RT for reporting it. So my conclusion is a bit like yours. There must be much more than £2 million, or they wouldn't have allowed 2 million to go to a couple of jokers in a derelict mill in Achtermuchty. There must be far more initiatives than one integrity initiative. There must be far more heads on the take. There must be far more journalists than are currently on the list, though the list is damning enough. Foreign editor at the BBC, foreign editor at Sky News, David Aronovich and Dominic Kennedy at the Times, foreign editor, or one of the top guys at the Glasgow Herald, people at the Telegraph, people. That's bad enough, but it must be much, much longer. Unless that old adage, thank God you cannot bribe or twist the average British journalist. But when you see what unbribed he'll do, you realise there's no reason to.
Indeed. And that is it for this week's Topple Galloway show.
How's your podcast going, by the way?
Yeah, really good. Who have I've
the
had,
Canary podcast. How do people go to it?
Yeah, if you just search on Twitter, Topple Uncaged, or you go to www.thecanary.co/podcast, and it comes up there. Yeah, it's really good. I've had some lovely guests on. I had the fabulous US comedian Lee Camp, who has his...
He's wonderful.
He is
I've been on his show.
I have you?
Yeah, he's really good, yeah.
I want to get... Lee, if you're watching, I keep saying to your agent, can I come on Redacted?
I've been on it.
Waiting.
I've been on it. In
He's
fact,
brilliant.
let's do a coast-to-coast.
Yes.
Not far in Britain, from the East Coast to the West Coast. Let's do a coast-to-coast tour with Lee Camp.
Yes.
Lee, are you listening?
He is brilliant. So I've had him on. I've had some really good music guests. I'm waiting for RT's Afshin Ratanzi to come back to me. Hopefully he'll be my guest this week. That'll be good.
Well, he's our guest this week also on RT Sputnik.
Oh, is he?
And the proximate cause is, according to Codswallop and Jukebox...
Oh, yes. We haven't even talked about this.
Ratanzi is a focus of the Mueller inquiry, conjuring fears of Afsan as Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange heading for the American dungeons. What's he done? He interviewed Julian Assange, and it was so secret he put it on television.
Exactly. But of course...
Anyway, I'm just checking that your podcast's going
It's
well.
lovely.
And you're going to appear with me on stage in Neath.
Yes, we just...
on the 27th of January.
I haven't been on stage since my Amdram days, darling, when I was about 16.
You'll be marvellous. Topple Galloway on stage, coming in Neath, Port Talbot, on the 27th of January.
Don't forget, follow us on Twitter. If you wish to comment on my rather interesting tracksuit today, feel free to do so. It's at Mr. Topple or at George Galloway.
I thought I'd won him over. He was starting to wear a soft hat and look smart and so on, but I've still got some work to do.
It reflects my mood. I'm angry this week, in a very angry mood, and therefore, so we go a bit street, and the tracksuits come out.
This is me at street. And if you can provide me with a designer yellow vest, I promise to wear it on stage.
Indeed.